I want to welcome all of our viewers to Virtual Fantasycon 2015. And I have a group of authors and bloggers here tonight with regard to the how to get your readers to fall in love or fall in hate with your characters. So we're gonna get both perspectives this panel. That's going to be interesting. To begin with, my name is Kimberly Brouillette. I am a paranormal murder mystery author, kind of a little bit of Alfred Hitchcock meets Agatha Christie. And so my first book was completed in 2012, at least mostly in 2013, but basically Secrets in the Shallows is the first book of the Monastery Murder series, and Devil in the Details is book 2 of the Monastery Murder series. Both of them are winners of the 2014 and 2015 Paranormal Awards, respectively. I am working on my third book right now. That is the final book of that trilogy, which is called Method in the Madness. And I hope to have it out by next year in time to enter it in the same award, so maybe I'll have all 3 win. That would be wonderful. But, excuse me, I want to introduce the rest of my panel here. And today we have Kenya Cooper from Charlotte, North Carolina. So Kenya, if you could please tell a little bit about yourself, just spend a minute.
Yes, I am actually Kenya Moore now since I got married.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Facebook won't let me change my name, but it's okay. I go by the pen name K.N. Lee. I write fantasy, urban fantasy, epic fantasy. I have also just wrote my first romance novella. That's called The Club, Liquid Lust. It's part of The Club, which is a multi-author project where, each month a different author puts out a book that is set in the same fictional town of Karim, Texas, where all of the characters go to the same club. I also am the author of Rise of the Flame, which is the first book I ever wrote. I wrote this when I was 11 years old on my mother's typewriter. It's epic fantasy, swords and sorcery, different races with different powers. So that's Rise of the Flame, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I also am the author of the Chronicles of Kawa series, which is urban fantasy. We have Netherworld, and we have Dark Prophet. These are out right now. The third book will be out in January. I write science fiction and horror as well. I have a few poetry books. You can find them all on Amazon or on my website on KN Lee. It's KNLEE.com. Good to meet you all.
You can be found on Goodreads and Amazon too, correct?
That's right. You can find me on Goodreads, KN Lee.
What is your Twitter?
It's K Nicole with a Y. So it's KNYCOLE_LEE.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ashley Dunnewin. Yeah. Am I pronouncing this right? Dunnewin?
Yes, correct.
Yay! Take it away.
Well, my name is Ashley. My author name is A.M. Dunnewin. I usually write historical fiction, but I did write my first fantasy. It's a dark fantasy called The Benighted, and it's available on Amazon. You can see it on Goodreads, Barnes & Nobles, and pretty much all my social media links have A.M. Dunnewin in it. And Dunnewin spelled Dunnewin.
Awesome. And they can find you on Twitter too, I take it.
Yes, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Heather, I know you're not an author, but you're an avid reader, and I know that you are involved with a lot of book clubs and blogs. Can you please explain what your association with books is?
All right. My name is Heather Witherell Ray, and I am admin for both Assassin's Reading Reviewing Group and Books All Things Paranormal and Romance. And pretty much for about the past year now is when I've really gotten into the social media side of books. And I beta read for several authors, read their works in progress while they're currently writing them, and also do reviews for them before their books have been released. And then also I help with, like right now I'm working with Stella Price for the Novel Experience Expo in Atlanta next year So I'm helping her with that and handle all the cover reveals, releases, any sales, promotions that you have coming up. I also help on that as well.
Now, have you done any actual writing as far as on the as far as any blogs or anything?
Yes, if you when you go to Assassins Reading Reviewing, I'll post all of my reviews and writing on there. I'll leave you guys to do the actual writing. I'll just read it and review it.
Okay. Why is it important to have your readers fall in love or hate with your characters? What are some examples of characters that authors that have made you fall in love or hate with? Make sure to say who the author is and the book title if you know it. So with regard to mine, one of my favorite things for readers to tell me is that they would fall in love with my characters. That is one of my favorite rewards for my writing, is getting them to. Does everybody agree with me on that?
Oh, yeah.
That they care about our characters enough to put some sort of emotional involvement in our books is one of my favorite things. One of the examples with regard to characters is, when I was in 6th grade and I read Watership Down by Richard Adams, and when you have these rabbits, and I know that this is a totally different reality than what we would normally live, but with regard to these rabbits, you actually grow to care about these individual rabbits, even though that's what they are. They each have a personality. They are having these situations that they're thrown into, and you start rooting for them, and you want them to succeed and not die, and escape from the wolves and the dogs or whatever, the cat. And you get to care about these characters. And I think part of that is knowing how that inner character feels, the inner person in that character, and so that you can empathize with them on what they're going through. And it's where I think that it's one of the ways that I think that he managed to do that, because you started rooting for those characters, is one example. Go ahead, Kenya, if you would give an example of, and why is it important?
It's important for an author to, make the reader fall in love with the character, because that's how you connect with the story, mm-hmm. and that's how you keep with it, because you want to see them succeed and reach their goals, and you want to see the villains fail. My favorite example of this is Interview with the Vampire. It's one of my the first vampire novels I ever read by Anne Rice, and you just fall in love with Louis, the main character, and you want to see him find happiness with his new life as a vampire. And you do have the villain, Lestat, but he's almost like an anti-villain, mm-hmm. You understand his motives as well. So that makes it even more interesting, because you're kind of conflicted, because you want to see them both happy. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most fun reads. I do like an outright evil character as well, one that you just hate.
Yeah. You want them to hate you.
Yeah. I have a few of those in my books. In the Chronicles of Koa, I have Bun, which is a demon that wants to pretty much kill Koa's mother, because Koa's mother is the only one that can kill him, but she's cursed. So it's important for me to make the reader understand why he's so bad, and so that you can root for Koa to defeat him. And I think that's just very important. You have to have that connection with the characters as a reader, and it's the author's job to do that.
I think it's really a good accomplishment when an author can make the reader both empathize, especially with a villain, but at the same time empathize with them, but also hate them at the same time. Yeah. And so it's I feel like I'm there's some characters along the way that some of those are the most significant ones, that you might run into are the ones that are very memorable. One of the things with regard to another way of doing that is being able to maybe utilize things in an unusual way. For instance, one of the things I do paranormal murder mysteries, so I have the ghosts in my stories, but the ghosts are normally thought to be really scary, usually. In this case, the ghosts are the victims. And so in most cases, they're the victims of the killer. So they are actually trying to help the investigators along the way to put them on the right path, to make sure that they've got the right clues and everything. And so in a way, they might be doing it through scary means because they're ghosts. It's not the norm, it's paranormal. So you have a paranormal situation and story, but I'm using the characters in a way that it's kind of it's different than the way you would normally have it. They're still good characters, they're just scary because they're ghosts, because it's not the norm. But the fact that they have been through that trauma, that they've been, they want justice, all that stuff, that the reader empathizes with them, that they're so desperate that they're trying to get these people's attention. They're trying to make them be able to get on the right path and find the clues they need in order to resolve, to solve the case. And so, you get that empathy with someone you might not normally empathize with, because you don't always empathize with the ghost, Okay, so Ashley, why don't you go ahead and give us some examples?
Okay, one of the examples I had was, well, what I think about what is important is having readers being able to relate to the story. It keeps the story interesting. And one of the examples I had was actually the Looking Glass War trilogy by Fred Bedore. One of the favorite characters I always remember is Hatter Madigan. He's a twisted take on the Mad Hatter, because the Looking Glass Wars is basically this whole different twisted version of Alice in Wonderland. And Hatter Madigan turns out is a secret agent who's very quirky, but he's very straight, and his humor it's hilarious because he's very serious, but it's hilarious. And so I always remember that, not just because I can relate, because sometimes I think I'm a little quirky and weird, but it's funny. And so that's why I thought was a little bit important about getting people to like your characters.
Mm-hmm. As far as, since you are a reader, what would you say are some of the best examples of characters from authors, that you felt like you've fallen in love with those characters, and why?
Oh, one of the ones, actually I just got through reading, and it's getting ready to be released, is Our Sins by Kimberly Brouillette, and it's a series. It's His Angel, My Demons, and then Our Sins. And the characters are just so realistic, and you have everything that they're going through. Abby's twin sister is murdered, killed in a car wreck, and Evan's father is actually the one that had ran into him and killed him. So their experiences and just being able to relate to them makes you really want to fall in love with them. And it just keeps you drawn in and what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? They're funny, but they're still realistic. Mm-hmm. And another one would be like Lexi Blake and Master No. They're basically kind of James Bondish books, and the characters, she's done such well to research what those type of characters would be, that you actually feel like you were part of their story when you're reading it.
Great. What are some unique ways or writing methods to make the readers fall in love or hate with your characters? So authors, if you can give examples from your books or books you've read and be specific, and then bloggers, give examples from books you've read, and be specific. So maybe some specific things that have stood out as far as writing methods or unique approaches to be able to accomplish what we're talking about. One of the things that I think that that I think is very important is inner thought. When you know what a person's thinking and inside their head, I think that it allows you to get into that more personal, deep level. I think in order to be able to truly empathize and care about these characters, you need to know what they think and what they feel, what they, maybe some of their backstory, and what is important to them in order to relate to them. You know, they become more real, like what Ashley was saying, they're realistic, you know, or I think Heather said that about being realistic. You know, you want to have those, if you want the person to relate to them, the reader to relate to it, they have to relate to them because it's a real person, you know, they're realistic to them, and they can empathize with their particular situation. So what I guess what I was getting at is that I love to either read or I try to use this in my stories to get the reader to know what the person's thinking and feeling. For instance, one of the things I like to use for that is social interaction. When a man and woman are relating to each other, you know, you don't necessarily say everything you're thinking about. So especially when you're first meeting. So a guy is attracted to a woman, you know, by using inner thought, you're able to express a lot of things that they're thinking that they obviously would not say. So that allows you to get more of an inside look into what they're like. And I think by doing that, you allow the reader to relate to them more. Okay, so Kenya, what would you say would be?
I agree with you on making them relatable. One thing that I do in my stories is, especially with Rise of the Flame, I wrote it when I was so young, and I've been working on it for so many years that I've had so many opportunities to put in real life experiences that I've gone through. So that makes, if I can, you know, put something that's happened to me in Lila's character, it makes her more real. You know, whether she's dealing with bullying or, you know, being mistreated or just different things that, you know, that I've gone through, it makes her more real to the reader, because it's something that I know, and it's real. So it's obvious that when you read it, it feels real, you know. So that's something I would do. Also, just drew a blank just now. I had another good point. You know, if you want your readers to love them, you just have to do your best to make them real. And, you know, like you said with dialogue, if your dialogue sounds stale, you know, the reader is going to lose touch with them. So you want to make sure that you read that over, read it out loud.
Yes.
Reading it out loud is a good way to tell if the dialogue sounds stale. So, you know, listen to how other people talk. Like if you're at a coffee shop or anywhere, just people watch and listen to how, you know, normal conversations flow, and try to keep it as authentic as possible.
That's something we mentioned in our last panel. We talked about that, about dialogue and how critical that is in conveying the relationships that are going on. And again, that's crucial to getting you to like or love your characters or hate them as well. So I agree. And so next one on the list is Ashley for question number 2.
I don't know, you guys had some really good examples. I don't know how I could top that one. The one thing I do a little bit differently with my books is I try to show a lot more than I tell. I try to look at their body language. I try to describe how they act, not just with their thoughts and dialogue, because that's extremely important, but their body structure. And because sometimes, like with one of my characters in The Benighted, Harlan, he's supposed to be in the background and very quiet, but he's very dramatic. Sometimes he has a little bit of humor that comes out, but he'll stand there, and if he kind of twitches or does something, you immediately think, well, that's not normal, like something's going to happen, and you know that that's a cue that some action scene or something's about to take place. And so I kind of use that to get the readers to not only understand him and read him and kind of like him so they pay attention, but also to subtly keep the scene going.
Something that kind of goes along with that would be also character flaws, I would think.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Character flaws, you've got, the things that, nobody's perfect. That's part of the reality of life, is that no one is perfect, and you can't do everything perfect all the time. But, you're going to have quirks. There's things that I do that annoy, Chris all the time. There's, things that you do, I'm sure, that annoy your significant other. So, it's just the way humanity is. But those are the things that we can also have that would endear our readers to our characters. If they, like, I mentioned in the previous panel, the fact that, I have a sheriff that is uncouth. And so he's sitting there and he's eating with his mouth, he's talking with his mouth full and stuff like that. And so you have these kind of funny moments where he's talking with his mouth full. And so, and so the reader, is sitting there reading it, and it's written out as if he's got his mouth full. So it looks like everything's misspelled, and, it's supposed to be that way because that's the way it sounds. And so, those are simple little things like what you're talking about, Ashley, that you can use in your dialogue and other gestures. It doesn't have to be dialogue; it can be action and everything else. The other thing is, I would say, is even their backstory to a degree goes in there, because if they're an orphan or some situation that they've come out of, you're going to naturally empathize with that character more than you would a murderer. So, in that opposite end, a murderer, you might already, not like that person just because of what they did to somebody, so those are things that can automatically be drawn in to help you, your readers love or hate your characters. So now, Heather, take it away.
I really enjoy when there's a prologue to begin with that shows a little bit of the history of the characters before the story actually gets started. It helps get you in the mindset of maybe what has happened to them before that will shape the way they are now. And also, like you guys have already said, the little movements, the detail to show what they're thinking, how they're acting. Is there a burger in the mouth? Is there a twitch of the foot? Is the neck getting red from, getting so angry? Is he trying to hold back tears because they're mad or upset? But whatever, little details like that to help get you into actually what's going on. I think that's a real big help.
One of the things I added to book one was, I think it was book one, I added a tickle fight. Okay. And it was just kind of a fun thing. I thought, well, this is a young couple and they're in love, and, they're getting ready to get married, and they're, all this stuff. And so it's almost Christmas, and, she's just this, beautiful woman, and young. And so she's coming down the stairs, and he meets her, and he starts tickling her, and it's, and it's just, it was a fun little scene, but it was more just to get the readers to love the characters. It wasn't really meant for fluff. It was meant to endear the characters to the readers. And so those real scenes, you got to put them in sparingly. You don't want them, all that fluff, per se, to be in there too much, but sometimes you might need it just for a little bit of character development. And that's sometimes also distinguishing marks or features, sometimes, like I've got one kid that's got freckles, so you can put those little things that make you, when you say those distinguish freckles, or whatever, something that will always associate that reader with a character. This question will depend on if you are an author or a blogger. So for the first three, the author is, based on your learning experiences, what advice would you give other authors about endearing your characters to your readers, and give examples to explain? I'll go ahead and let Kenya go ahead and start on that one, since I've been talking.
For my advice to other authors is pretty much the same. Just try to make your characters feel real, and whether that's using experiences from yourself or things that you see in your family or your best friend. I do that a lot. Koa, from the Chronicles of Koa book, is I came up with her when I was living in Korea, but I realized that I didn't even know I did this, but after I finished it, it's like she is pretty much my best friend. My best friend Paula. They are the same,
Aww.
you know, the same personalities, just spicy and, you know, outgoing and headstrong. So just that's one of the easiest things you can do. You have all the material right there. You could be just like your brother or, you know, people you know. That's just something that's easy material to draw from is your own experiences. So yeah, I would recommend that.
Obviously, it's something you admire in her for you to even subconsciously put it in your book. So I mean, that's a good point, is drawing positive things out of people based on real experience.
Negative things too, if you want them to hate them.
All come into play. You know, it's nice to be able to have those characters that you love in other people be portrayed in characters that you have created.
Yeah.
What about you, Ashley?
I actually agree 100% with Kenya. It's all about people you know, your life experiences. In fact, based on the negative, my villain was based off of this person I used to work with. And I would always come home like angry, and so I was like, "Oh, you make a great villain." So pretty much everything that villain became was this person. But if anyone had any problems trying to figure out how to get their characters to be relatable, I mean, just look at people around you, like what Kenna was saying. Is look at characters in books, look at actors or movies, things that you like or that you physically or emotionally feel attached to or dislike. That can all be put into your book.
Yeah.
And before we go into the blogger side, I'll go ahead and handle that as another author before I ask Heather her question. One of the things also that we mentioned in the last panel that I think is also very useful is being able to understand that character fully enough to a point where you can draw out the things that are going to be important. You might not use all that information. You know, there's going to be backstory that's just up here in your head, or you wrote it down in your character sheet. But there's going to be parts of that are going to be important. And if you do like 20 questions, one of the things that I would say is very useful is being able to do 20 questions based on that character so that you know what that person thinks and feels, and that you can genuinely come from that perspective as you're writing. When you can do that, then, you know, if you know what that character would go through, and it's a good character, you know, say, you know, it's a decent character, then if you know where they came from, if you said you asked the 20 questions, and then you kind of act them out a little bit, you know, like I'll talk about with the sheriff, you know, and, you know, you get to the point where you are acting out that character so that you know the way they stand, the way they sit, the way they talk, the way they, you know, gestures, and you can bring those things into your story. I think that makes a big difference. And, you know, just acting it out. I think speaking out loud is very important. Knowing what the person's going to say and saying it out loud. Sometimes it sounds different when you say it out loud than it does when when you're just writing it. Yeah. And you can, like, you know, what I'm talking about, you can actually kind of see what that guy's like rather than me just, you know, just putting it on paper. Go ahead, Heather, with next. Your aspect would be from what advice would you give authors in regard to how to make an impact on readers? And it was with regard to getting them to fall in love or hate with your characters.
I agree with what you guys, you know, were all saying. You know, have, you know, what's going on in your own life, your friend's life. You know, that boss at work. I have read books to where, you know, the villain in there, I can say, "Oh, that's my boss." Oh, a person could draw into their, you know, what's going on with them now. Even with the books, you know, even with the villains that you love to hate. One thing that I absolutely hate is when an author, and I've only come across this a couple of times, where there is no distinction, even in one paragraph, between who's talking or who's thinking. Everything runs together. So it helps to fall in love with them more if you could break it out, and where the reader actually knows who it is that's thinking, who's talking, rather than just all jumbled up to where a paragraph is like that sheriff with the burger in his mouth. You don't know what he's saying. Well, you don't know who's talking. So just make that clear distinction there.
The last question, what we're going to do is talk about what is your favorite author and why, and how has that author influenced your work and writing, or at least understanding of books. So go ahead, Kenya, if you would start with that.
Okay. So my favorite authors are Stephen King, Anne Rice, and Terry Goodkin. I just recently, well, not recently, but past couple of years, added Brandon Sanderson, because their stories are just not, they have so many twists and turns that it keeps you guessing, keeps you interested, and they don't normally have the outcomes that you'd expect. That's why I love them, and those are the people that inspired me to become a writer. And I try to mirror my writing the same way so that my readers aren't bored, or, they can't really guess what's going to happen. It's going to be a surprise every time. Like I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about your villains and everything, and I just love how Anne Rice has such rich vampire lore that's so different than Dracula and, all the other vampire writers. Like, her lore is the one to beat. Mm-hmm. So, just the origins of her vampires. And when I mentioned Lestat as a villain that you kind of love, you can't really hate him. She has this whole part of her lore is that if you're a vampire and you turn another vampire, the one you turned will always hate you. And that's what happened with Louis in Interview with the Vampire. He hated Lestat, and that's what happens with any of them. And in the second book in the series, The Vampire Lestat, you get to see that backstory. It's an actual thing. It's like a curse. And that's like something that has stuck with me since I was a kid. That little tidbit, that rich history. And, that's what I try to put little things in like that in my stories too. Something that'll stay with you forever.
If I had to pick one, it would be Edgar Allan Poe. I love his work. I love how he's dark, and yet it's just beautiful the way he writes. It seems like every poem he writes has its own rhythm, almost like it's a song. And that's exactly what I wish, I hope to strive that my books are like, that it's dark, but there's this beauty and romance to it that's very subtle, but just really brings it out and just really captures people.
What about you, Heather?
Well, since I really just got into reading to the extent that I have the past couple of years, there were two more recent that have really stood out and that I will read everything they put out now, and that's Cherise Sinclair and Lexi Blake. And in Cherise's, they had a Masters of the Shadowlands. It was a human trafficking ring that they were working with the FBI to bring down. And just reading that, and it was just so realistic. And after that is when I really started hearing more and more about human trafficking. Mm-hmm. So that's what really stuck out to me for her, and just the way that she wrote it and how realistic it was. Mm-hmm. And then with Lexi Blake's, it's the Masters and Mercenaries series, and it's a security team, go take out the bad guys, James Bond, and you don't really expect what's going to happen. She leaves you by the end of the book, you're like, no, and you're just shocked. And some of her books was that when I'd go to write a review, I'd have to wait a couple of days just because I'm like, no, or seriously, I mean, it way she writes it, it is just so realistic, and it impacts you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if somebody is killed, when the good guys are killed, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two.
Awesome. Well, since I've used, I one of my favorites is Charles Dickens. I've used him both of the panels, so I won't go too much into him. I also love Jane Austen. We mentioned her in the other panel, but I actually love her too. I love her characters, and that you get to where you empathize with them, especially like in Sense and Sensibility, where you have the Dashwoods and you have these women that are put in this based on their society. You know, at that time, the rules, you know, aren't as generous to women as they were to men, and so they find themselves in this situation, and you empathize with them because of their situation. And you know, and then because of their situation, they're looked down upon, and they're not acceptable for, you know, high society, and, you know, all these things, you know. And so you know, I love that you get to the point where you just empathize with these characters so much. I love that, you know, when you feel, you know, when they make you feel. I think that's the key, is making us feel. And Charles Dickens, with regard to his, you know, being able to be a literary genius with regard to his use of cliffhangers and things like that. To me, that's one of my, I love the way that he used so many new techniques in writing at that time. And then, of course, the surprise of Stephen King or Alfred Hitchcock, you know, things like that. You know, I love that, where you can take a situation that you wouldn't necessarily expect, that thing, you know, a clown, for instance. How could make a clown so scary that you cannot sleep at night, or not go near a stupid sewer drain? You know, I couldn't sleep for weeks after reading it.
Yeah.
You know, or Christine, you know, I know that it's a car, but it's more than a car. You know, it's a scary car. I'm scared of going in your car, you know. And so you know, kind of coming out of the box and, you know, using those things to care about your story and your characters, and even the villains in this case. You know, you got it. You know, you talk about hate. You know, the hate character, that clown. But I still hate clowns to this day. They're still scary. So, you know, I still don't like sewer drains, all because of it, you know. So, you know, talk about impact. You know, Stephen King has done a lot of that. So it's really interesting how these different authors have influenced not only just our daily, you know, our writing, obviously, and how we read books and look at books, but to actually influence our daily lives, you know, things we're even scared about, you know. Kenya, why don't you go ahead and let the readers know how to get in touch with you easily, too?
You can find me on www.knlee.com. From there, you can find all of my social media. You can find all of my YouTube videos. I'm on 2 YouTube channels, one for myself and one for the Fictionistas, which is a channel of 5 different female authors that are with Book Truck Publishing. Each day, we tackle a different subject, and we post videos to help, you know, other writers or other, you know, readers. And you can also sign up for my newsletter there, so you can keep in touch with all of my new releases. I have 2 in November, 1 in December, and 1 in January. So it's a good time to stay in touch. And yeah, I respond very quickly on my Facebook fan page, which is facebook.com/KNYCOLELEE. That's K Nicole Lee.
Ashley, take it away.
Probably actually the easiest way to get in touch with me is on my blog, which is amdunnewin.wordpress.com. All my social networking links are there. Buy links if you want to even just check out my books or even a sneak peek. And I also run a book club for indie authors called Author Underground. So if any indie authors out there want their books featured, just let me know, and hopefully in a couple months I can have you on there. And I try to respond pretty quickly, but yeah. that's pretty much it.
Heather, how can people get in touch with you?
They can find me on Facebook at Assassins Reading Reviewing Group, and also Books All Things Paranormal and Romance. And if you have, for authors, if you have any cover reveals or releases coming up, you can either message me on the page, or you can send me an email at hray16@gmail.com. And I usually am pretty fast at getting back to you, except when I'm at work during the day. Can't do it there, but I do get back to you and get things posted. The more advance notice I have, the better. But if not, I can do last minute things as well.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I'm again Kimberly Brouillette with Virtual Fantasycon 2015. Hopefully, we will make this an annual event, and we'll be hosting other events as well in the near future. If you have any questions and you'd like to reach me directly, you can contact me at info@kimberlybrouillette.com, and that is BROUILLETTE. And you can also find me on Facebook at KimberlyBrouillette.com. Kimberly Huddle Brouillette, and also on Twitter at Right for You. I'm also available on Goodreads, and of course my books are listed on Amazon as well as other outlets. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And if you are an author and would like to be considered for future events, feel free to also email me at info@KimberlyBrouillette.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and watching our video. I hope you would, if you would give me some comments and feedback, I would love to hear it with regard to helping us with future panels. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.